Mr. Farmer Lee Jones, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me on, Nathan.
My pleasure. It's an honor, in fact. I want to jump in straight away with something you told me before when we briefly chatted. You told me that at 19 years old, you watched, after 25 years of your parents' work, you watched it be auctioned off. And I want to know, tell me about that. What did that moment do to you, not only as a farmer, but as a son?
Ah, you want me to rehash one of the most painful days of my life. I don't know whether you ever had a high school sweetheart that you thought you were madly in love with, even though you didn't really know what love was at that point, and she ditched you for your best friend. Uh, it, uh, it was uncomprehendable to see them as hardworking and honest and um, with the utmost of integrity, trying to produce a good product. And, you know, watching one day 25 years of that work be auctioned off, everything right down to my mother's car and our home, all the equipment, all the tractors, all the land. And we basically crawled away and started over. And we jokingly say on the farm that we were too stupid to know we couldn't start over. And so we did. The banks, of course, wouldn't loan us a dime after that. But the interest rates, and I don't know how many of the listeners are, following what interest rates are today, but here in the United States, they're on a slight uptick. They ran at a historic low here for about 10 years at, 3%, 3.5%. And of course, that drove the housing boom and some of that. But they've moved up in there in that 6.5% range. In the late 70s and early 80s, in the Jimmy Carter days here, they hit 22%. So you borrowed $100, you paid the $100 back, you paid $22 for the privilege. And that alone was a tough one. And then they had a hailstorm and it wiped all the crops out. You would borrow your operating capital in the winter to invest in everything you were going to need to grow the crop. And as the crops came in, you repaid the loans and hopefully you had something to reinvest back into the farm. And when that hailstorm hit in mid-July of 83, we limped through the rest of the year, but we knew it was over. And I believe by November of that year, they auctioned. We stood there and watched them auction piece by piece every single thing on the farm.
How'd you get there? How did that happen? What led to that?
If my dad were here today, he would not mention a hailstorm. He would not mention 22% interest. He would just say, well, I was a lousy manager and I didn't know what I was doing. And that's what he would say. I saw it differently at 19 and saw how hard they worked. And I didn't think that he was a lousy manager. In 78, which for many of the listeners probably sounds like an eternity ago, but they had a very successful year. They had reinvested back into the business, poured every nickel back in, and they were selling wholesale by the truckload, high volume, low margin, shipping to places. And I don't know in England if any of these are familiar, but Kroger, Big Bear, Pick and Pay, Fisher Fazio, A&P, Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, very large chain grocery stores where they may have 200 to 1,400 stores. We were selling to them. They would pay you in 90 to 120 days with no interest. So you were borrowing money from the bank at 22%, loaning it to those chain grocery stores in essence, and they were getting free money for 3 months or 4 months before they pay you. You were a small farmer. You had really very little leverage, and they paid you when they paid you. And it was a challenging dichotomy. You needed them where you thought you did. And
so you're losing that 22% already before you even get going.
Yeah. So, but I think that through every tragedy, we have to look for the silver lining in that. And I think that as devastating as that was, it allowed us to rethink what we were doing and the way we were doing it. If you think about, the universities, somehow they all seem to be financially strapped, or so they say. And you think about who's making money in this big corporate world, and it's the pharmaceutical companies and the chemical companies. And so they give grants to the universities and say, we'd like to give you a $10 million grant to do research to help the farmers. And by the way, the research needs to include how our chemicals can help the farmers. So the research is done, and it's much like our Western culture of medicine. A farmer gets a disease on a crop, you send a sample into the university, and the university sends you a recommendation back that says, here's the chemical you use to get rid of this disease. You send a plant in with insect infestation, they send you back a recommendation to kill the insect, and here's the pharmaceutical or chemical recommendation to kill that. It's much like our Western culture of medicine. It's always treating the symptom. We're putting a Band-Aid on. And it never really felt right with my dad, as he would send these plants in to get recommendations, and it was always about putting a chemical on. And he was old enough to have seen a time pre-chemical, pre-synthetic fertilizer.
Right.
You can go back to biblical times. Harvest fruit for 6 years. On the 7th year, let the fruit fall to the ground. And on the 8th year, you had an abundant harvest. He saw old timers that a large farm was 100 acres. Today, the average might be anywhere between 3,500 and 20,000 acres.
Wow.
But on that 100 acres, to make it even smaller, a third of it was in pasture, a third of it was in what they call cover crops, and a third of it was in product to take to market. They actually made more money growing a third as much. Supply and demand has so much to do with everything. So they limited the supply, and it wasn't, I think, by design. It was just the way that you farm. The supply was limited to 1/3. The next year you rotated, and where it was pasture, it became cover, and where the pasture was became where you produced the crops, and you rotated. It was a true way to rotate and let the land sit what we call fallow, or to rest and to rebuild, regenerate, and it worked. The nutritional levels were 80% higher 100 years ago, and the occurrences in diseases in the last 100 years with the new methodology have increased 3,000%. Kidney, liver, heart, cancer disease, attention deficit disorder, autism, childhood obesity, allergies, diabetes. A 3,000% increase in a 100-year period, while the nutritional levels have gone down 50 to 80%. It's not sustainable. So, yep, we lost the farm, but it gave us a chance to rethink what we're doing.
The wheels are falling off. Everything's falling apart. And you've seen this. You were 19. A lot of people would quit then and say, screw this. It's not meant to be. Let's pack it in. Let's quit. I want to know why you didn't.
Yeah, it's in our DNA. I've seen chefs that have lost everything. I've seen them lose empires of restaurants, or even one restaurant. And they can take the restaurant. They can take everything, but they can't take your knowledge. They can't take your heart. They can't take the DNA that's built in. I mean, I know a chef that started over cooking on a garbage can on the roadside and started over. And he ended up going on to cook for Oprah Winfrey as a personal chef, and he's madly successful today. It's an opportunity to rethink, reset, analyze. Sometimes you have to look at it as a gift. It was a gift. At the time, it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like just what it was. It was a, punch to the gut. But, quit never was even an option. My mother even challenged us. She said, okay, this is your opportunity to go get a real job, have weekends off, have hospitalization, have benefits. Now's your chance. This is the break that you've been looking for. Well, I don't know that we were looking for it. Maybe it was the break she was looking for, but it was never even a consideration. It was just, okay, how are we going to do this? And,
Right.
you know, there was no resources other than our backbone and our will and to
Commitment
start
to it.
over.
I think sometimes that those moments, a lot of people look at them from an outside perspective and think it's those survival moments are moments in themselves. And I think a lot of the time, more than that, it's not a moment, it's a decision, right? While the wheels are falling off, while shit hits a fan, still finding yourself rooted and calm in the chaos and being able to switch to that part of you that's driven by a bigger mission and a bigger purpose, grabbing that bull by the fucking horns and going for it because you know that is ultimately your commitment and your decision to it. And then other people look at you down the line and say, you know, you were lucky to survive that. Meanwhile, not knowing that what they might call luck is really you just staying rooted and committed to your purpose long enough and longer than everybody else.
Absolutely. I mean, it was, looking back, it was a gift, and it was rough. You mentioned survival, and we were in survival mode, and there was no HR.
Right.
It was just, we couldn't hire, really top quality help because couldn't pay them. It, it was beyond rough, but I wouldn't trade it. And I got to work side by side with my father. And, we went to battle. And we were fortunate that there were a group of chefs that said, we need you. We need somebody committed to doing this without chemical, growing it the right way, grow it for the integrity and the quality and the flavor of the product rather than the tons per acre. It was their chance to mold us into what they had seen in Europe, because Europe somehow was able to manage to stay more focused to their roots than America. America was all about tons per acre. I don't know if you remember a fellow by the name of Earl Butz. He was the Secretary of Agriculture, and his message to farmers in the 70s was to get big or get out. Rip every hedgerow out, plant every acre, and produce tons per acre. And the model that still exists in America today for farmers is to produce as many tons per acre as you can, as efficiently and cheaply as possible, and you might stay in business. It's focused on volume rather than quality and integrity of product. And that dynamic does not work long run. We're seeing the effects of it. We're a very unhealthy nation. I'm sure you're seeing it in Europe. It's here. We're very unhealthy here. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think that it's not doom and gloom. There is hope. The land, the soil will respond to good treatment. Our bodies will respond to good treatment. What we put in the body makes a huge difference. How we treat it. There's the soil. Treating the soil is very much like treating ourselves. There's such a parallel there.
Yeah. I want to paraphrase something you mentioned to me before. The chefs at Ritz-Carlton said to you, your food in America is shit. I need flavor.
That was Jean-Louis Paladin, who came over from Europe. He was a highly touted. It was interesting. You folks, I'm sure, have heard about the Watergate incident. Of course, we've had plenty of drama recently to make us forget about Watergate, but the Watergate Hotel was an iconic hotel just outside of D.C. And, they talk about a time when Nixon was in presidency and the Watergate. And so the owner of the Watergate wanted to do something to change the image of the Watergate Hotel. So they brought this very highly touted French chef in, Jean-Louis Paladin. He was very gregarious, very outspoken, very confident, and very good. And he came over and he basically said, and of course we had read about him and we had started over and we were starting to focus on chefs. And he basically said to me, your food is shit in America. And if you want to grow for me, you need to figure out the right way to grow. And it was really, we didn't take it offensively at all. We took it as a challenge and encouragement and motivation because we believed he was exactly right. And so,
Right.
because when you started looking at those agricultural books, it was pre-chemical, it was pre-synthetic fertilizer, it was rotating the crops, it was doing the right things for the soil. We believe all life begins with healthy soil. Healthy soil, healthy vegetables, healthy people, healthy environment. And Jean-Louis was spot on.
I
His
bet a lot of
message, I'm
farmers
sure,
didn't
to
want to hear
some who
that, though,
were,
right?
they did not, and they still don't. Right.
Right.
And it was, we grabbed around both ankles and said, teach us. And it was really a key moment for, our start over. And we're honored that he was as straightforward and honest and direct. We respond to that. I don't know. That was, it was almost militant, but it was what we needed at the time. It was the right message at the right time.
You can always trust a chef for a blunt opinion and an honest one.
That's right.
At that.
Yep. And we love that. We're so grateful for chefs literally around the country that took us under their wing and guided us and encouraged us and motivated us and inspired us. There's so many.
I bet. And even stepping outside
And
of
a lot
chefs,
of those,
like on a global scale, people think vegetables are healthy by default, right? And I think there's probably an uncomfortable truth there. And I want to ask you what is that message like for everyone else? Those that believe that vegetables are simply healthy. Is there more to it than that?
But the thing is, why does it need to be uncomfortable? It's not like it's taking medicine. It's not like Karo syrup. The vegetables are good. If they're grown the right way and they have flavor and you use varieties for flavor rather than tons per acre, they're amazing. I'm not anti-protein or anti-beef or lamb or pork. I love them. I think that we can put a little smaller portion of beef and a little bigger vegetable, and you've got a good move in the right direction. But I believe that people make the assumption that a carrot is a carrot is a carrot is a carrot.
Right, that's what I'm talking about. Like, what is that difference between one that is grown great and one that is potentially even harmful?
All the difference in the world. If you think about if you've got unhealthy soil and you put the plant into it, and then you look at the traditional distribution system. I can't speak for any other country. I suspect that it is there's a similar model in some cases. Product and we're seeing a direct shift right now. Product is starting to become more imported into the United States, less grown here. Labor costs are high. The margins are so thin, and it's more efficient to ship the product in to the United States than to grow it here. We know a farmer just this last year, tremendous vegetable growers, 100 years growing vegetables. They can't do it anymore. They had a sale. They sold off of their own choice before it was too late, before somebody forced that on them. And they sold off all their vegetable equipment. And the father and the two sons now are going to finish out the rest of their life until retirement, growing corn, wheat, and beans that they can do with mechanization and GMO, and they can produce a living. But if you think about a product being harvested, hypothetically in Mexico, where labor is very cheap, it comes across, and then it gets packed in the USA. And then it goes to pick any city, Buffalo, Chicago, New York, Minnesota, Philadelphia, Orlando, Miami, any place. So then it gets shipped to a wholesale purveyor. Now it's sitting in a warehouse. FIFO, first in, first out. They have to order a trailer load because it's more efficient. They got a trailer load of carrots. They got a better deal because they bought a trailer load. Now they're sitting in a cooler, maintained at 34.5 degrees with the humidity control so they can hold those carrots. And they ship in, first out. Now it goes to a grocery store. It's 3 weeks old, 2 weeks old, 4 weeks old, 6 weeks old. Every day that a product is harvested, it loses a percentage of its nutritional value. I would debate that in many cases, what we're consuming, even when we think we're doing the right thing by eating vegetables, that we're eating nothing more than mere roughage. The closer to the source that we can consume the product. If we could, we have a saying on the farm, know thy farmer. Who produced it? Where was it produced? How was it grown? Was it grown ethically? And we try and take sustainability, and we talk about now sustainability seemed to be a buzzword. We want a sustainable farm. If you think
what does
about
that mean?
sustainability, I never was, very athletic in school, and I always hated the day that we had in gym class where we all had to do pull-ups. Well, I couldn't do a pull-up to save my life when I was a kid. I was overweight, and I thought, well, I know I can hang on to the bar for a little bit. At least I can jump up and hold on to the bar until my fingers would slowly slip away. And then we had one kid, Tom Crapsey. He could do a left-handed pull-up. He could do 20 of those with his left hand and 20 with his right. He was unbelievable. It was one of those humiliating days that, but it was sustaining until you couldn't sustain. Regenerative is you're building, you're growing. We look at it, and every farmer talks about leaving land in better condition for future generations. We like to take it a little bit broader than that. It not only needs to include the land, but it needs to include the environment, and it needs to include the people. And that's really important to us. But our goal is to get the balance in the soil. If you have healthy soil, you put a healthy plant into that, it's unbelievable the results that we're seeing. Back off of using the chemicals. Get the soil in balance.
So I've grown a couple of vegetables over the years, and none of them have lasted more than like 2 weeks once they're harvested. And I want to know, how is it possible that, by the time consumers get them, that they could potentially be 6 weeks old? Is that meant to happen? Is that natural? Is it because
I think that
preservatives are being added, or what's happening?
I definitely think that there are preservatives. I think refrigeration, post-harvest handling has a big effect. Temperature. If they can get the temperature down as quickly as possible and slow the respiration rate, that helps it maintain, and then getting it in refrigeration. But I'm not really here to badmouth, what they're doing. It's a big system, and it feeds people. But I think that we're also seeing the result of that in,
But someone
the
needs to
system.
know. Nobody's badmouthing it. I'm talking about the truth. That's what we want
Yeah.
to know, because otherwise I think the issue comes with, you're talking about businesses closing down, people not wanting to pay more money. That comes from people not knowing what the hell's going on, and somebody's got to be open about it. Somebody's got to tell them, because they're not going to express this. You know what I mean? I think that's a part of the problem, is that either the people don't know, and not enough people are willing to talk about it out of fear of judgment or whatever it may be. And I know you're one of the guys that really stands by this being rooted in authenticity, in growing the right way. And I think part of that process and that sense of responsibility for the food world comes to education, because I know even my mother, my sister, my close friends, they have no idea what great produce means. What does the difference? They don't know the difference between one carrot and the other outside of what it looks like. And if we all know, especially in the States, fruit and vegetables look incredible. They're big, they're bright, they're delicious looking, they're huge, they're colorful, but they taste like nothing. They taste like shit. It's like water. There's no flavor whatsoever. It's like a trick, because this conception that we eat with our eyes, and we don't. We do not whatsoever. It gives us a perception, a false perception, that makes us think that this thing, that it's almost like steroids. If I put them in a metaphor, when you see a bodybuilder who's jacked, that looks insanely good, and some of them are not even big, but they're just insanely shredded and have this muscular physique, but they're packed full of steroids, and on the inside, they're falling to pieces, heart rates through the roof. They've got, endless mental issues. Their natural testosterone levels are out the window. And the same thing I believe is happening with ingredients, with produce, with fruits, with vegetables, because they look good on the outside, but meanwhile, no one actually knows what's going on inside, what it took to get there. And I wonder if there's, I don't know, I'm speaking from only what I know from my experience as a chef, but your knowledge obviously is superior to that as someone who's actually in the soil with, your hands dirty growing these things. Is there anything you think that would shock people if they knew?
How little nutritional value, nutrient density is actually in what they're consuming. It's my belief that predominantly what we're eating is roughage. And you can Google the nutritional level has decreased 50 to 80% in a 100-year period. But you can also
Really?
look at the occurrences in diseases and see
Mm.
you are what you eat. We've got the proof to see that it isn't working. And people are sickly. They're overweight. They're stressed. They're pushing hard. And, the food value isn't there.
Mm.
We actually put a lab in because we wanted to know what was going on. We test outside product. We test our own product. We don't have it perfect. We're on the right path. We're moving in a good direction. We're seeing sometimes as high as 50 to 700% above USDA average. If you think about, I'm sure all of us at some point as an adult have gone and had blood work. And basically
Right.
what that does is gives you an printout of the mineral levels in your body. The same minerals that are in your body are the same minerals that are in the soil. If they're deficient in the soil and you're consuming those, then they're going to be deficient in your body. If you have deficiencies in your body, your immune system is compromised, and consequently, you have a pathway for a 3,000% increase in kidney, liver, heart, cancer disease, attention deficit disorder, autism, childhood obesity, allergies, all those things that we mentioned earlier, and so many more. We're finding so many occurrences of things that weren't showing up even 25 or 50 years ago. We believe there's a direct correlation with the way that we're growing our food and the way that we're handling it, the post-harvest handling, what we're putting in the way of preservatives and food coloring and dyes. It's crap. And it's showing up in the results of a very sickly nation and, in a lot of countries. So once we identify what those mineral deficiencies are in the soil, it's pretty amazing. If you think about, maybe you've said this, maybe your listeners have said it, maybe they heard a parent say it at some point, and maybe they said it jokingly, maybe they said it tongue in cheek, maybe they didn't know whether it was really true, maybe they thought it was an excuse to go sit in the sun. I need some vitamin D. I'm going to go out and get some sunshine. You said it, or you
Yes,
heard it
sir.
said, right?
We all have.
There's so much more truth to it than people understand.
Mm.
If you can get your mind around the idea that your body is a receptacle for energy from the sun, it's not such a far bridge to recognize that different types of plants will harvest different types of energy from the sun. So you identify the deficiencies in the soil. Once you've recognized those, then you can plant the types of plants that will harvest the types of energy to fulfill the minerals. We call it a cocktail. It's a cocktail blend. If you think about a cocktail, it's so many parts of one ingredient, so many parts of another ingredient, so many parts of another. So it actually takes us more management time to put the cover crop together. So based on the deficiencies, it might be clover, alfalfa, buckwheat, rye, vetch, Sudan grass, up to 16 different varieties of plants that we're planting into the ground. An unprecedented commitment to cover crops. 2/3 of the acreage. If you were to walk on the farm with me this morning, Nathan, you would see all these big fields and it would look like weeds. But there's vetch, there's clover, there's alfalfa, there's barley, there's buckwheat. Even weeds will harvest certain types of energy. But we've chosen to eliminate every weed every plant other than the genetically modified corn or wheat and beans, and they look perfect. All these beautiful rows of the corn, and there's no other plant growing. If nothing more, the weeds will harvest energy, but if you can focus it on the types of plants that you're planting into the ground, you harvest that energy. And when you quit using the chemicals to control those weeds, because what's happening is when they're using the chemicals to control the weeds, they told farmers that when it hit the ground and it killed the weeds, then it dissipated. It was a lie. They knew it was a lie. We know it's a lie. It not only kills the weeds on the top, but it also kills all the biology in the soil. So then the farmers are adding synthetic fertilizers to try and increase the yields. Well, because the biology is dead in the soil, it can't break the food down into a form that the plant recognizes it, and it runs off and it's going into the lakes and the tributaries. We have lots of algal bloom problems in the lakes because when the synthetic fertilizers hit the lake, fortunately the biology is alive in the lake. It breaks the food down into a form that the plant recognizes it, and the algae or algal bloom is growing marvelously. In the meantime, nutritional levels are going down in the vegetables. So when you quit using the chemicals, the biology comes back. It's unbelievable how it'll respond. It's just like our bodies. That there's more life below the Earth's surface than there is above. And so then when you use the cover crops to harvest that energy, feed the biology, the nutritional levels go up. It's not rocket science. It's working in harmony with nature rather than trying to outsmart it. This stuff works, and it's exciting to see that when you treat the soil right, it'll give you the vegetables that you need for your body. It's no different. Matthew and I were just talking about this. When you, as poor a shape as some of us might be in, it's never too late. Within 2 weeks, your body will respond to good treatment, and the soil will do the same thing. And it's unbelievable to see the results. We can do this. This is not doom and gloom. But like Thomas Keller has a plaque in his kitchen that says sense of urgency. There is a sense of urgency right now. It becomes up to our generation to make a difference. Look, it is expensive. We always joke about whole food, whole check. Well, they say that because it rhymes or it sounds good or something. And I'm not here to promote or demote Whole Foods. The point is, we think food is expensive here. As it relates to our income in the United States, we produce food cheaper than any other country in the world. More of our disposable income is available to us to be able to buy a home, buy an automobile, go on a vacation, do something, a sport or a hobby. So as it relates to our income, there are some third world countries that literally the people are working around the clock just to feed themselves to keep from starving. So as it relates to our income, we produce food cheaper than any other country in the world, yet we have the highest health care in the world. There's a conundrum there. This doesn't work. So there's a sense of urgency about getting this right. And it's exciting. Even between the rows where we used to think...
mustn't always agree with that, right? Like you must have, I'm sure, received a certain degree of hate or other opinions from other of these big scale farmers that think you're wrong or you're naive to think that this is the way things should be done. Have you ever received anything like that?
Everybody's entitled to their opinion, and that's okay. I think that a lot of neighbors go by and shake their heads and say, what are they doing now? How can they possibly take 2/3 of their acreage and put it in cover crops and harvest nothing to sell? But that's a commitment to the integrity of the product. You're harvesting that energy. Then when you put the plant in there the next year to grow and harvest, it's unbelievable. The nutritional levels go up, and it's a healthier product. Even between the rows, when we used to think needed to be weed-free and clean and pretty, we're planting cover crops in between those rows. If you can visualize, the plant is harvesting that energy. The roots are going out on an angle, and then you've got the crops that you're growing to consume. It's picking that back up, and the nutritional levels go up. This isn't rocket science. It works. My dad had a saying, the only thing we're trying to do is get as good as the growers were 100 years ago. In many cases, that's true. It was pre-chemical. It was pre-synthetic fertilizer. And the nutritional levels were 80% higher. So I'm in the library here My dad read every one of these books. Half of the library has agricultural books that are a minimum of 100 years old. In Europe, 100 years isn't very old. In America, that's pretty old. And you look and you see what they were doing. They were rotating the crops. They were putting cover crops in. And so going back, in a lot of ways, we've got to take a half step backward. Now, obviously, are we using some AI? Are we using some technology? Are we using things that are available today that weren't then? Yes, you have to, or you can't compete. It's imperative. But I think that sometimes we throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so going back, losing the farm, it was such a blessing to have a reset and a chance to rethink, what the hell are we doing? And it never felt right to my dad to get the recommendations from the university to put these chemicals on to control or fix the problem. Because it didn't. All it did was put a Band-Aid on it. And that's what we do with Western culture medicine. In many cases, they make more money getting you well or keeping you well, putting a Band-Aid on it. You get a strep throat. You go to the doctor. He gives you a penicillin, a amoxicillin, a viacillin, and it patches it up. And then 6 months later, you go back again and they do it again. Guess what? They're selling pharmaceutical drugs. They're in the business of doing that.
Right.
Have you ever been to a doctor
They don't
and
want
they
to
say,
cure
Nathan,
you. They'd be out of business.
why are you doing this? Why are you coming in with this strep throat? Your immune system is compromised. We need to take a look at the mineral levels in your body and understand what's going on, and let's fix this. No, they don't make money that way. That's my opinion, and I'm going to stick to it. I'm not running for policy or politics, so I'll say what I want.
I'd vote for you.
Yeah, so
You got my vote.
yeah. Well, thanks. I'm not running.
Flavor and quality is expensive, right?
And nutrition.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's all expensive, right? But that is your religion. Like, what I believe, that it comes across that you're absolutely driven and committed to this.
Absolutely, it's our life's work.
What does that cost, though? What does that cost in time and money and patience and heartbreak? What is the cost of that?
What does it cost not to do it? At the end of the day, you want to put your head on the pillow and feel you good about what you did. And when you lay down the last time and you don't wake up, you can't take anything with you. We never did this for the money. We got to work together as a family, and we wanted to feel proud about what we produced, and we wanted to be able to make a difference and move the needle. And if we can produce food that's healthy, people are getting it. People are more savvy, more interested, more tuned in, more aware of where food is coming from and how it's grown, how the people are being taken care of on those farms, how the land is being taken care of, how we're treating the environment. All those things are important to everybody else, and they're important to us. This isn't new. This isn't a new trend. This is a way of life for us. This is who we are. I wish we could walk around and you could see some of the things we're doing. We've got one greenhouse. It was 50 years old, weeds growing up through it. We bought it from a widow. Her husband had died. They had worked their lives, and she needed to clean the land off to be able to sell the land for a retirement. We bought the stuff. We bought these greenhouses, 4 acres of greenhouse, 50 years old, 8 guys, 12 weeks, tore it down, brought it back, put it back up. We couldn't afford the new ones. We put it back up. Our neighbor's producing popcorn. As a byproduct of popcorn, he has hundreds of tons of corn cobs that are a waste product. He's having to pay to get rid of them and haul them over 8 miles. We're now buying them from him, giving him $26 a ton for it instead of him having to pay to get rid of it. We put boiler systems in. We ran 1 million foot of tubing through the ground. It's geothermal heating. We used the corn cobs to heat the boiler, to heat the water, run the hot water through the greenhouse, and we heat the greenhouse with no fossil fuels. Those little things, one bite at a time. We're small. We're like the flea on the end of the tail, on the end of the dog. We can't move the needle from a financial standpoint, but we can through messaging. We can through trying to do it the right way, one small bite at a time. And what does it cost not to do it? I don't think that we ever really looked at it from a monetary standpoint and say, well, let's do this because we're going to improve the bottom line and we're going to make more money. What's the right way to do this, and what's going to make us feel good about our lives at the end of this? And did we make a difference?
Right. You have a vegetable lab, from what I understand, and hospital grade level centrifuges and lab diagnostics on studying a carrot. What happened to just using a shovel? Why are you doing that? And what's the impact of it?
Well, we wanted to know what we were doing, what was working, what was moving the needle, what was making a difference, not from a financial standpoint, but from a nutritional standpoint, a flavor standpoint. Uh, and that really was the impetus. Uh, there probably were grants available for some of this. This equipment is not new to the medical world, but it's new to measuring vegetable nutrition, nutritional density, uh, nitrate oxides, measuring the soil, taking a look at the biology, being able to see that biology alive and well. You can actually see on a microscope, you can see the biology consuming the food. It has to consume it. On larger terms, folks think about manure as something gross or stinky, animal manure. But the biology in the soil breaks the food down into a form, and then when it excretes it, the plant recognizes it, and that's where the plant can pick up the nutritional value, and that shows up then in the crop when we consume it. You can actually see the biology consuming the food. It's biting and eating at it, and you can see the excretion. Then it's changed into a form that the plant recognizes it. When you're using the chemical, that biology is dead, and you can put all the fertilizer in the world on it. It's not going to move the nutritional level because the plant doesn't recognize it as something as a nutritional value to the plant.
Right. Why is everyone not doing this?
Hard to stay in business this way. It's not anything that's moved the bottom line for us. We have not yet. When we started, we've been doing this now 40 years since this is version 2.0. No chef has ever said, "Farmer, I want some really sexy, beautiful, great looking, great tasting vegetables that are more nutritious than I can buy from anybody else," because it's not going to move the needle for them. We think that it can be good tasting and good looking in its unique way. I think that there's beauty in everything. I think that a gnarly looking carrot grown the right way is way sexier than a perfect one that you talked about, where they're big and they're beautiful and they look like they're blown up on steroids and they're shiny and they're massive size. It's about, the quality and integrity of that plant.
Yeah. Mediocrity is cheap. That's the truth.
It is.
Not everyone realizes it, but it's an expectation we have. I think that we're, if you want to create something that has genuine, unforgettable impact, there's a cost to it. There's a cost of time, of pressure, of money, of patience. And most people don't get that. They just want the cheapest viable product, but they don't, but they also want health. And it's like, I say it a lot, everybody wants to cook until it's time to chop onions. They don't realize that there's a process. There's a process involved that they might not like, a cost to it that is going to get them to the outcome they want. But ultimately, they have to realize and understand that cost and be willing to pay it.
I think that the time has come. I think people are more savvy, more aware, more tuned in. People aren't stupid. They're getting it, and it's moving. The needle is moving. I hope I get to see it in my lifetime. It's been a lifetime journey for my brother and I, for my mother and father, for our extended family. There's 168 team members here that are like family to us. We live and die together. We fought through COVID together. We did not furlough. And, of course, the CFO was saying, "You need to furlough. You need to furlough. You got 6 months left. You need to furlough. You got 3 months left. You need to furlough." And we didn't. We did everything we knew how to do to keep afloat. We opened retail at the farm here to make product available, healthy, clean food available to individuals in our community. We opened up a nationwide home delivery where people could order something and it could come directly from our farm, directly to their front porch or back porch or their condo, or they have an Aunt Matilda in Tampa and she has 3 of everything and they don't know what to get her. They could buy her a gift of vegetables that says, "We care about your health and well-being." We did everything we knew how to do. Um, it, it, it was a challenge.
I bet. Didn't
I'm
you say
glad it
it's
didn't
COVID
go
wiped out
longer.
60% of your business overnight, right?
60% of our business disappeared overnight. Yeah.
What was your first move, and how close were you to walking away?
Oh,
Was that a possibility? Like, could that have happened?
no, no. We know too much about the industry at this point. There are so many, there's so many side businesses that could be developed from the demand that we see that no, it was never a consideration to walk away. No, I mean, I think the 80s prepared us for this. I hoped I never got to experience that again, that survival mode, but we were back in it and we were swinging.
That's interesting. You say that.
Th-
Do you
th-
think that that pain and that suffering, what you faced the first time around, played a part in your survival the second time?
Oh,
Built that resilience?
absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. There was no question. It was not a question of whether we're going to quit. It just meant, okay, roll up the sleeves, time to fight. We've been there before. Yeah. No, there was no question. And
Do you
I
think
worked
that people are
harder.
born with that, or do you think that can be taught, or what's your perception on that?
No, I don't. I think it's something that you can develop. You find out, you find out things. Bad things are going to happen to all of us. Bad things happen to good people. It's not if they happen, they will. How we handle them is what matters. And if these are opportunities to, you know, do a little self-analysis. No
Big time.
question. There was never a question whether we were going to quit.
Mm,
It just meant fight.
yeah, I think a lot of people mistake um, the environment of success versus growth, in the sense of people thinking that growth looks pretty and it doesn't, right? It comes with chaos, challenge, hard truths, a lot of pain, sometimes tears. But everyone hits a wall, right? Everyone hits a wall. If you're in pursuit of anything, at some point you will hit a wall. I always say it's like the universe whispering into your ear, how much do you want this? Is this just your plan, or is it your purpose? I've been there too, ultimately, many times still. And it's like, that season of uh, one thing after another, and you're like, when's it gonna stop? But you just persevere and you keep going. Eventually, the rainbow comes after the rain, right? I was working full time as a chef. I told you my background was as a cook in the early days of building my business, building Food Story Media. Um, Working in the kind of early hours, building this idea, coming up with what it is, what it looks like, what it sounds like. This is after working 80 hours a week as a cook. As we know, that industry's fun. And in the space of like a month, I had all of my equipment stolen, my flat was flooded, and I broke my ankle. And that was one of those moments where I was like, what else? Like, what else have you got for me? That was the universe whispering, how much do you really want this? And like you, I'm stubborn in the negative sense, but also in the positive sense. I think everyone requires a little bit of stubbornness, because that's what shifts in those moments. You're sat there and you don't go to the habitual state of complaining, of self-pity. You grasp on, you hold tenacity for what you believe in and your dreams, because that's the thing that matters. It's that commitment. I think that commitment and obsession sometimes looks like extremity to many people who live in excuses. But I think if the mission matters most, if the mission matters enough to you, you don't negotiate with the storm. And that's the resilience we're talking about, because resilience is ultimately when your reasons outlive your excuses.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. I think that you get to a point where, I mean, you don't question, gee, is something bad going to happen again? You get to the point where you embrace
Mm,
those things. Maybe
the
breaking
uncertainty.
the ankle meant that you were spending too much time on your feet and not using your head enough. You
Hmm.
know, we can analyze. bad things that happen. And if you can get to a point where you say, okay, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to rebuild, to regrow. It's just like a kitchen. Somebody designs a kitchen and you use it for six months or six years, and you say, man, why didn't we put this cleaning sink over here?
Right.
It would have made so much more sense. So
Yeah.
if you can get to the point where those obstacle problems become opportunities. I
Mhm.
always have told this, my dad, people seem to always they would be lined up outside of his office. And you've got to keep in mind, the office was a building that housed electrical equipment from when we lost the farm. And the people, when they bought it, the electrical equipment didn't want the barn that was built over the electrical equipment. And we offered to get the barn off of the electrical equipment so they could get to the electrical equipment. So that barn that was going to get torn down was his office. People would be lined up to talk with him, either in the morning first thing or in the evening. And they always wanted to be the bearer of bad news. They wanted to come and tell him about something that was broke or something that didn't work or something that they just thought that they could see, if he would react to it. And I always said he could have been sitting there and somebody would have just cut his foot off and he would have said, great. That was one of his famous words was, great. I've still got one foot. Thank goodness I've got that one, and it wouldn't matter. And it's bad things are going to happen. How are you going to turn it into an opportunity? Turn a problem into an opportunity. So
Right.
sometimes you can get stinking thinking, as Zig Ziglar used to say, and sometimes I'm guilty of that. And you've got to do a check and say, wait a minute, get your head out of the sand and revisit this and get your head right and relook at the problem as an opportunity. So easier to say
Amen to
than it
that.
is to do.
For sure. But sometimes like it's always that little thing. Sometimes you just hear something, see something that sparks something else, right? A lot of people stuck in that ignorance is bliss.
I think that if you're not sort of always in a state of flux, if things are all running smoothly, you're not, there's a book that I read, I can't tell you the
If it's not challenging you, it's not changing you.
if it isn't broke, break it.
Right.
And keep moving and keep changing. If you're not changing, then you're not moving fast enough. My dad also had a saying that you can be on the right set of tracks, and if you're not moving fast enough, you can still get run over. We have these Jonesisms that run around in our heads all the time. We can hear him. We lost him August 4th, 2020. I got to work with him for 40 years, 6 days a week, and on the 7th day at church. And I miss him immensely, but I feel him all around, and I hear those voices and those little things all the time.
What's the biggest thing he taught you?
Never quit. Yeah. And if something's worth doing, do it the right way. The duct tape is only a Band-Aid. It's kind of like the pharmaceutical and the chemical company and the Western culture of medicine. And that's an analogy. There's a lot of folks out there. We're working with a guy by the name of Dr. Will Lee. He's not like entirely in the holistic camp, and he's not entirely in the Western culture. He believes that those can merge and work together, and I believe that that's the case. And it's not one is 100% wrong, and the other one 100% right. I think that, and his name is Will Lee, WILL, and then LI. Him and his brother have been working together for 40 years.
You told me before about this time, as we mentioned, you had not one but two major pivotal moments. First being with your parents falling apart at the farm, and second, COVID, which took you in a bit of a different direction. You also mentioned chefs that supported you during that period through COVID. I want to know what that taught you about loyalty and leadership around that moment.
Yeah, when we lost the farm the first time, it was all of these wholesale chain grocery stores, and it was always about, we'll buy it from you if your price is the lowest or competitive. It was always, financially driven. The relationships were very difficult to build. It was a commodity. It was really it leaned into the commodity world of that, where when we started over and chefs took us under the wing and they said, do this the right way and we'll support you. You know, when COVID hit, 60% of the business went away. We committed to keeping our team together. And we launched the home delivery from basically $0 of income. And the first thing we did was send out 300 boxes to 300 chefs. And you think about this, I mean, it kind of ties right in with exactly what we've been talking about. How many chefs miss their kid's birthday, miss their anniversary, miss their wife's birthday, miss first day at school, miss something in their family
It's a lot of
because they're
sacrifice.
working 80 to 100 hours a week. And they've always dreamed of being able to cook with their families, to be at home, to watch the ball games, to spend time with their kids, to spend time with their spouses. I don't know what the divorce rate is with culinary world, but I can imagine that it would be high because there's just, if you're committed to the culinary world of chefs and the restaurant business, it's all consuming and something, it's so difficult to find the balance. Through COVID, chefs all of a sudden were at home with their families. They were cooking meals together. They were spending time with their kids. It was the gift that they'd always looked for. Here was this huge tragedy, but out of that, they got to spend time with the families and cook together and have meals with their families. It's amazing. We sent out 300 boxes and said, we're going to make it through this, chef. This is a challenging time. We've launched a home delivery. We want to send you a box. We know you don't just stop cooking after 80 hours a week for 20 years. Here's a box. We'd love for you to cook it with your family and enjoy it and stay healthy during this precarious time for all of us. And by the way,
you give it to them?
We gave it to them. And we said, by the way, we're launching this home delivery, and whatever you prepare with it, we'd love for you to post it and put a link to the home delivery. And they did. And, you know, we were just swinging like crazy, trying to keep things going and keep the payroll made and keep product planted and getting the right amounts. We thought we were naive and thinking this was going to be short-lived. And so we felt like if we didn't keep planting, that when we snapped out of it in a month, that's the naivety part, that we thought it was just going to be a short blip, that if we didn't keep planting, that then when it did pop out, the demand was going to be there and we weren't going to be able to fill the supply. So we kept planting. And, you know, we had to keep adjusting it down and down, but we also wanted to keep it coming for the home delivery. And chefs really helped to support and promote that. And it drew enough revenue in to keep the payroll made, to keep the wheels turning, to keep the wheels from falling off. But at one point, I was just exhausted. And I went home for lunch and I sat down at the kitchen table, started looking through some Facebook posts, saw the chefs promoting this home delivery and the support. And what I sensed and what I felt was, you're not going down on our watch, farmer. We got you. And I literally sobbed at the table because it was at that moment I knew together we were going to prevail through this. So we're always going to be grateful, and we always were, but even more so, you know, it makes me realize the depth of those relationships, and the chefs do have our back, and I hope to God that they know that we have theirs. You know, always the chefs say, well, we couldn't do what we do without you, with what you provide. And I appreciate them saying that, but the reality is, if we closed up tomorrow, there's not one chef that would have to close their restaurant. But without those chefs, we couldn't survive. So it is a symbiotic relationship of chef and farmer working together. But the reality is, without their belief in what we're doing, and I think that it's good that there are other farms that are emulating. There are other farms that are doing their version of what we're doing. And that's fun to have watched. I mean, when we started doing this 40 years ago, there was a handful of people that would even consider going back and going ahead at the same time and trying to do it the way we were doing it. But there was that group of chefs that said, do it this way and we'll support you. So it's really wonderful to see. In the early 80s, farmers markets were at a historic low. My mother's generation, my mother never went to a farm market as an adult. My grandmother's generation, they went to the farmers markets. They had gardens. They grew their own. My grandmother was a great cook. My mother is a terrible cook, and she'll admit it. I mean, it was the generation of the two-income households. It was post-World War II when the women were tasked with going and building submarines and building army tanks, and it was gender-specific at that time. The men were off in war, and the women were tasked with coming and building. And so they recognized, we can be a two-income household. So after World War II, both mom and dad worked outside of the family. And of course, that was the introduction of service-friendly food, the darn TV dinners. I don't know if you remember those, Nathan.
I heard about them.
They were in like this metal trays.
Yeah.
And there was these nasty frozen green beans and Salisbury steak and instant mashed potatoes. My mother thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we ate those things. They were garbage. And, so now, today, in 2025, more farmers markets in the United States than in the history of the United States, which is wonderful. And support them. Go out to those farmers markets. Buy direct.
You talk about that time of COVID when that happened. You sent out 300 boxes though for free. A lot of people think you're crazy for that. Why? That obviously turned things around. Like, you made that investment. What does a box cost? Like a retail, what would it sell for?
With the freight?
Yeah.
$150 to $200.
So you're talking like,
we had the product. The product was not going anywhere. We had our team. We wanted to pick something.
$30,000+.
We wanted to ship.
You made the investment.
It never was even a consideration. Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are afraid of that. No, in the sense of giving something away, afraid to make that gesture. Always, I think a lot of people get stuck with expectation and therefore don't get to that point. That was a bold move from you. What did you see at that time, or what was the internal message in yourself that made you do that?
It was just, we knew that they were hurting, that they were struggling. We felt like we were in it together with them. We wanted to send a message that said, we care about you. We love you. We want you to eat healthy. We want you to have something. We had the food on the farm. We had our team here. Ship it and get it to them. And, eventually it comes back. It wasn't really sitting and thinking from a financial standpoint, well, this is a financial investment. It's just from the heart, do the right thing, and it comes back. It really was not given it that much consideration. I'm sure our CFO was thinking about it, but
right. I bet. But this seems to be a behavior, a recurring pattern of yours, that you have this underlying belief that if you do something good, if you do the right thing, you'll be repaid in the future.
I don't even think we think about a repayment. I think do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And, and that's what makes you sleep good at night. That's what, when it's all over, somebody may say, yep, they did the right thing. Nobody's going to say, well, gee, look at all the money you made. It's never been about the money.
No one remembers that, right? They remember the impact, the legacy, the change. That's what counts. And you kind of came full circle because you bought back the farm, right?
Yeah. The timing wasn't great. My dad was still with us, and the neighbor who bought the farm when we lost it, completely oblivious to the struggle we were in at that time, because they were commodity growers. They were really not affected. other than maybe they didn't go out to a restaurant on Friday night or something to eat. But they probably didn't even understand the complexity of our situation right across the road, because when we started over, we started literally right across the road. I drove by the farm that we lost for 40 years and personally dreamed of someday maybe, that farm would be ours again. And they called us and said, we're ready to retire. We've both reached 65 and we're ready to retire. You have any interest in buying the farm back? It's like, for all the timing. And so we sat down as a family and discussed it. And we said, we want to do this, but we don't want any banks involved. And sometimes things happen that you don't really understand completely. There were land out here usually never even gets a for sale sign on it. A farm becomes available and somebody's grandfather promised it to somebody else's grandfather, said, if you ever decide to sell that, would you consider selling it to me? And a grandfather that's not even alive promised it to a grandfather that's not even alive. But those were passed down from family promises and said, if we ever decide to sell it, you'll be the first to know. And so a lot of times they change hands about once in a lifetime. And when they do, a lot of times there's never a for sale sign. So it's kind of, the land is a tough commodity out here. But there was a company that had bought a farm, and it always makes us sick. It was beautiful farm ground. And what do? They split this 100-acre farm. They put a plant right in the middle of it. So they've got 40 acres on one side and 60 acres on another side, and they've got the plant right square in the middle. And we're driving by one day, and all of a sudden there's a for sale sign on the two different pieces. And you just don't see for sale signs on land, agricultural land out here. Of course, the first thing I did was call them. It's zoned commercial, and they wanted a crazy amount of money for it. And I said, yeah, thanks, no thanks. Well, about 6 months later, he called back and he says, yeah, he goes, we were just kind of kicking the tires to see if somebody might be interested in it commercially, but would you be interested in it for agricultural price? Agriculture isn't really their business. And we sat down and talked about it. We said, no, we're not going to overpay for it, but let's see if we can buy it. And we ended up with kind of like the buys of the lifetime. We bought those two pieces really well. And then there was a neighbor that had put up a beautiful barn and a very high dollar house, something that farmers wouldn't build for the most part. And he went to sell the house, and the person didn't want the 10 acres in the barn. That was right across the street from us as well. He says, can we just do a handshake and you take the barn and the 10 acres off my hands? I sold the house, but I needed to unload the barn and the 10 acres. Didn't really need it. It was one of those too good to be true deals. So there were 3 agricultural purchases that my brother and I made 10 years ago. They were just too good to be true. We bought them. Didn't know exactly why. We got the answer. The farm comes for sale across the road. Real estate was a hot commodity. We flipped those very quickly. We were able to convert to cash. And Mom kicked in a little, and we bought the farm back with no banks. It was like the banks did us no favors before. I'm not a flip you off kind of guy, but that's kind of how we felt about the banks. They tend to come to you when you don't need them, and when you do, they disappear.
Mm-hmm.
So
what did that redemption feel like?
What's that?
Sounds like redemption. What did that feel like at that time?
Pretty damn good. My brother's son lives there with his wife and child, and another one coming. We opened the farm market there on that property. The only regret of it was my dad helped us strategize how to do it without banks. We sat down at the picnic table and had a family meeting. We lost him 4 months. It was a slow process. We lost him 4 months before the transaction was official and the title was in our name. And we wouldn't walk on the property until it was titled back. He knew we were
He knew it
doing
was
it.
coming.
He knew it was going to happen, but I really wanted him to be able to walk that farm.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure
my
he's
brother
still
and I
walking
took a
it with
walk.
you
We went
today.
up into a loft that probably hadn't been visited for 40 years. We went up into that loft and we found 6 brand new, unused, 40-year-old Bob Jones Farms boxes, which was the brand that my dad sold under. His name was Bob Jones, and it was Bob Jones
Right.
Farms. And we found these brand new, unused Bob Jones Farms boxes, and that was kind of cool. Needless to say, we took those and I've got them up in a special spot. But so anyway,
Incredible.
yeah.
As you say, though, you still walk the farms, hearing his voice in your ears.
Every day.
The
Absolutely.
Jonesisms. I love that.
I mean, this library, we harvested black walnut from the farm, and we
Right.
built the shelves. He was a voracious book reader. Whenever he would run across a book that he thought that our management team should read, he would buy 10 to 15 of them, whatever, and then hand them out and say, here's your next reading. And I can look here in the library. There's several sets of books that I can see that he didn't get handed out. I mean, right up until the last day, once he is on dialysis, I mean, him and the doctor negotiated, and they made a decision that they were going to stop doing the dialysis, which is checkmate. And he said, okay, send my family. But before he said, okay, I heard him say, did you check? He's talking to the doctor in his bed and family sitting out in the living room. He says, did you check the hemoglobin levels? Did you check this? Did you check? He was going down through a checklist to make sure that the doctor had exhausted. And the doc said, Bob, you told me when it was time I needed to tell you. I've pulled every rabbit out of the hat I can. It's time. And he said, okay, send my family in one at a time.
Mm.
He had a list of jobs for every one of us and assignments.
You're joking.
And then a day later, he said, I'm sorry it's taking so long. And of course, by that evening, he passed. But when his father died, my grandmother had to borrow money from other family members to afford burying my grandfather. He died at 49. I never met him. And it always bothered my dad. My dad was 18 at the time when his dad died. And so my dad probably 20 years ago bought 10 plots in the cemetery. He went to the woods and harvested a tree. He loved black walnut and had his own casket made. We didn't know about it at the time. He planned out everything. And of course, as COVID happened, you weren't having funerals in funeral homes because of the distancing. But he wanted it in front of the R&D building. He wanted a tent set up. So it was outdoor. He went and paid for the tent. He went to the funeral home, said, I want you to get me ready. I don't want a funeral in your funeral home. He paid him. He had every single thing paid for ahead of time. But, cut the tree, built the casket. He told me in about 6 months, before he died, he said, I've got kind of a weird request for you. He goes, I don't really like to talk to you about this, but, the funeral home director, because I didn't buy the casket from him, won't let me store it there until I need it. I need a place to hide the damn thing. He goes, if I put it at the farm someplace, I'm going to weird everybody out. Because no matter where I hide it, somebody's going to find it.
Right.
I said, Dad, it's no problem. I'll put it in my basement. I didn't really want to put the casket in my basement, but we put it in the basement. And I was hoping it was going to be 6 years before we needed it, but it was 6 months. And he had told me when we put it there, he says, now listen, I don't want you going and buying a mattress for that casket. He says, any good farmer knows a good clean bale of straw is way more comfortable than a mattress. When you take that casket up to the funeral home, you take a bale of straw along. So I got Chef Jamie and sous chef Dario and one other guy, and we loaded in the pickup truck and put a bale of straw on and took it up, and on the appropriate time, they brought Dad out, and we had a celebration of life, and we loaded them. We, as a team of Belgian draft horses, still on the farm. It's a connection to the old agricultural ways. I feel like it's kind of a bridge between the old ways and today. And we loaded him on the horse and wagon. His grandkids loaded him on the wagon, and we took him for one last ride through the field and across the road, literally, within, yards of the farm, and he's in his resting place there. Stone was paid for, had everything on it that he wanted said. Oh,
It's a man with a plan.
they called my mother after to get the appropriate date, because they had to put that on the
Right.
stone before they delivered it. And they said, your husband, when he came in, was pretty emotional that day. He had everything written down on a piece of paper that he wanted set on the stone. And we called him back right away. He had a spelling error in one of the words. And he said, I told you to do it exactly the way I said. If there's a spelling error, leave it be. They all knew I couldn't spell anyway. Leave the damn thing the way I told you. So anyway, and then they said, well, Mrs. Jones, would you like to know what he put on your stone? And she says, mine? He put what? I'll put what's on mine. What did he say? And he said, she was a good woman. And she's like, oh no, he's not. You're not putting that on there. And so my mom gave them a scripture that she liked, and so they put the scripture on and not so it was kind of funny, but and on his side it said,
Wow.
I tried. And that's so.
What a story, man. What a story. I'm honored to sit and listen to all of this. It's incredible what a ride you've had and what a life experience this has been, and
what a journey.
The wisdom
Yeah.
your father taught you, and all that you're passing on to the world. And I feel absolutely nothing but blessed to have this conversation with you and be able to share this with our world. And as a last question, I'd love to ask you if you could summarize this life experience, this wisdom, everything you've been through, what would be your ultimate 3 ingredients of success?
Well, trust in God. We're religious. I'm sure not everybody has the same beliefs as us. It's the only constant. People will fail you. People will let you down. I will let you down somehow, some way. But ultimately, that is something that's constant. I try and read every morning. And even if you don't believe, some of those rules about do the right thing because they're the right thing to do are pretty darn good advice. Particularly New Testament. Do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and do unto others as you would have them do unto you, are all beliefs that we try and live by. That, from a food perspective, we want to be proud of the food that we serve and that we grow and that we provide for chefs and for individuals at home. And I'm glad that you didn't, one of the questions always is, what's your favorite vegetable? And your question is way deeper than that. But I never like to answer my favorite vegetable, because it's always whatever vegetable is in season is what I'm loving. When asparagus is in season, we should eat it 3 times a day. And when it's out of season, we should lust for it for 10 more months. Just because we can get anything on any given day and ship it across the world, from an environmental standpoint, from a financial standpoint, from a common sense standpoint, I don't know that we necessarily should. Mother Nature provides such a natural rhythm to what we should be eating and when we should be eating it. And I think if we are really in tune with our bodies, your bodies will even tell you. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, Nathan, but I will have times where my body will say, you need Swiss chard, or you need red beets. Mineral deficiencies within yourself, and your body will tell. I've read in National Geographics about women instinctively eating the soil. They didn't know why. Nobody taught them necessarily to eat the soil, but their bodies were deprived of minerals that they needed, and they would actually eat the soil to get the minerals that their body were deficient in. Have you experienced that before, where your body said that you need a specific
Cravings of something, yeah. Healthy cravings, absolutely.
Healthy cravings. Well, I have
Yeah.
cravings for ice cream every night.
Yeah, I know.
But I'm
That's what
talking about
that's the normal type of cravings. But like when you feel you need
that
something
sugar's a
that's
killer.
nutritious,
We've got
right?
to fight that sugar off. Damn, it's wicked stuff.
But I want to thank you again for your time. It's been an absolute honor, and please do stay connected. We'll come visit you sometime and break bread together.
I would love it. Open invitation. We'll leave the porch light on.
Thank you, sir.